Here we go. Welcome to the NFL Legends Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster, and today we have a very special guest. And this is a man I could probably spend 5 minutes telling you the accomplishments of his life, but we're just going to keep this short so we get straight to the interview. He's known as the Dean of NFL Officials. He officiated in the NFL from 1960 to 1990. Help me welcome to the show, Jim Tunney. How you doing today, Jim?
Mike, I'm doing great. Thanks for the call, and look forward to talking with you.
You're the first official we've ever had on the show. So we've had 10 or 12 Hall of Fame players, but I figured if we're going to get an official, we might as well get one that's seen it all.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your life growing up. I know your mother and father were a very important part of the man that you have become. You want to talk a little bit about your life growing up?
I think parenting starts certainly in the home, and I was very fortunate to be born to my mom and dad, who just were terrific people my whole life. In fact, I lived at home until I was graduating from college. College was only 14 minutes away, and at that time it was much less expensive for me to still live at home. It wasn't a dorm, so I never had a car until I was a freshman in college, and about the middle of my freshman year, I grew up with starting work at about 12. I was during World War II, and all the men were gone. I started working as a gardener in the park and everything. And my dad said, "Now, when you get your pay, bring it to me, and I'll save it for you." So I thought, well, I guess that's what you do. So I gave my dad my check every year until I was probably in high school or college. And then I got a car, I guess, as a result of all that. But they were just great role models. My dad was a football official and basketball as well, was a teacher and a coach. He was a coach of Kenny Washington, the famous black athlete from UCLA, and the first black player to play for the West Coast of the Los Angeles Rams at the time after he'd gone to UCLA. My mom was a homemaker. She was there the whole time with the 4 children. I was the oldest of the 4, and they were terrific. My dad was a very strict disciplinarian. In fact, because he was a teacher, he used on me what they call the Board of Education. I got my.
I had a teacher that had one of those. He wasn't a very popular guy.
I grew up with that board across my family many times as a kind of a rambunctious kid. I was a little shy when I was a kid. My dad taught me a lot of lessons, mostly by just his example of what he did and who he was. I thought what I wanted to be is the best athlete. I thought I was the best athlete in our family. And then I got reading about my dad, who was all West Coast at Loyola, all American in football and basketball, played for the Oakland Oaks in AAA baseball. So I guess not the best athlete. Then my brother came on 9 years later, and ended up running track and running a 9,700. Well, now I'm the 3rd best athlete in the family. So,
you're better than your mom, though, right?
Well, mom was everything. I thought my dad was when I was fearful of if I was misbehaved for some reason. He hit me with that board. It was actually my mom. My mom would say, "You wait till your dad gets home." So I learned later on that actually my mom was the fear. And my dad, he was just the executioner. All he did was do what my mom wanted him to do. And so I grew up respecting my mother. I have great respect. Well, both are passed away now, but I had great respect for my mother. She lived to be 96 and a half. My dad died early at 59 of a massive heart attack. It was mostly hereditary from too much cholesterol and arterial sclerosis, as they call it in those days, hardening of the arteries. Died early on. Very disappointing, very tough on me at the time. And but my mom was a guiding light. She had 4 children and 20 grandchildren and 21 great-grandchildren. So she was just a wonderful a person to me my entire life. I'm very, very fortunate to have those two people.
Now, you talked about your dad was a football official. Is this something from a young age where you were following him around while he refereed games?
He worked games in the Rose Bowl in Pasadena for Pasadena Junior College and high school as well as college. And we walked through the tunnel, and if you know the Rose Bowl, it's the south end, which is where the Rose Bowl, the big rose sign is. We'd walk through the gate, and my dad would point to the gate attendant and say, he's my assistant. I'd be carrying the bag. I went to games at 5 and 6 years of age. At about 9 years of age, I was sitting on the bench at Pasadena Junior College game. My dad came over at halftime and said, "You take a look at this little kid. He's going to really be something." It was Jackie Robinson. He was sitting alongside of me. And Jackie was a terrific athlete at Pasadena Junior College before he went to UCLA. And then, of course, the Dodgers and all that, number 42 that we have now. But I met Jackie when he was 19 and I was 9. And my dad was refereeing those games. I was fortunate to go to those games in Rose Bowl and the Coliseum. We went to Kezar Stadium. We went to a game at St. Mary's and all up and down the coast where my dad was working, and I would go with him a lot of places.
Yeah, and you talked about Kenny Washington, who I wrote an article on The Grueling Truth about a couple of years ago. Him and Jackie Robinson both. The thing that really stood out to me was the kind of self-control they had, because I don't think people now realize the kind of stuff they had to go through back then playing.
They don't. Kenny was about the only black kid at Abraham Lincoln High School in UCLA. My dad was coaching. Right behind me on my wall, I have a picture of my dad and Kenny. Kenny was a tall, skinny kid, very shy. Threw the ball almost 100 yards one time in the Coliseum. Just amazing athlete. But I got to know Kenny when he went to UCLA and then on, and I was not in the NFL, but followed him all the way until he hit on bad times in the early 70s. And Phil and I, Mike Frankovich from UCLA, put on a fundraiser for Kenny at the Hollywood Palladium. And he was just a wonderful man all the time, very shy, very kind, very well aware of other people, as was Jackie. I didn't know Jackie very well after I'd met him that first time, but we saw everything that Jackie did as he went into the major leagues with Branch Rickey as his mentor. So it was great to know those people and be part of it. I grew up with, I don't think anybody in our family, including my dad, especially my dad, had any kind of prejudice. There was no such thing as prejudice in our family. Everybody was everybody, whoever they were, as long as they were the kind of people that we want to be around, we hung around them. So I hung around a lot of great people because of my dad and his association in athletics.
All right, now your college career, you played at Occidental College. I think you played basketball and football, correct?
I did. Football, basketball, and baseball.
Okay,
I played football, basketball, football, first, go ahead, first and second year is all.
Yeah, so, I mean, what were some of your highlights as a player?
Well, one of the things I wanted to do in Chile, I went to Alhambra High School, and I said to my dad, I want to be a coach. I knew, like, when I was 12, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a coach. I could tell right from the beginning what I wanted to do was to coach people. So I went through junior high school and high school and college looking at teachers and coaches and examining them. Nobody told me to do this, but examining them is that the kind of teacher I want to be? Oh, I like what that teacher does. Oh, I don't like what that teacher does. I'm not going to do that. I will avoid that. And as I went through to make my choice to go to college, I thought I could play basketball, not so much football or baseball, but basketball, either at SC or USC or UCLA. And I thought, no, I'm not that talented, and I want to play. I want to play all the sports. And so Dad suggested I go to Occidental College, and he knew the dean of students, Ben Cully, and he knew they had a department called Freeb. And he said, Occidental produces more physical education majors than USC and UCLA combined in those days. And so I went to Oxy for that reason, to become a coach, become a teacher, and it was the best choice for me. Small school, 1,200 students, and I got to play football, basketball, and baseball, and that was what I wanted to do.
All right, so you became a high school teacher and coach after you got out of there, but When did you start officiating, and was that something where you started officiating just for supplemental income, or was it something that you really wanted to do because you'd seen your father do it?
Well, when I was playing basketball at Occidental, in those days you could play summer league. You can't do that now, but we had a bunch of guys playing summer league. So we'd play summer league basketball at either Alhambra High School or Almanza or someplace in Alhambra. And the director said, why don't you come a little early and officiate the little kids? They play at 5:30. You don't play till 7:30. You can do that. He said, no, I can't pay you, but he said I can hire you as a playground director. So I'd referee a basketball game for little kids. 90 cents they paid me, 90 cents. And so at Occidental, then I would go out and I would officiate industrial league games. Again, 90 cents. I officiated games on campus for free at Occidental College. And when I started officiating, that's when I started at 90 cents a game. I thought that was really good. That wasn't a lot of money to save, but that's what it was for me. But so when I started coaching and teaching, I'd teach all day and then and coach in the afternoon. And then on Friday nights or Saturday or Thursday nights or whenever I could, I'd officiate high school games. And we were paying $12.50 for a game in those days. And I thought, I worked a couple, 3 games a weekend. That's $37.50. I thought, you can't beat this. This is like finding money in the streets,
But that was a lot more money back then than it is now, though. So
it was great. $12.50 and $37 for a weekend, perhaps on many weekends was great. I was coaching my first year of coaching at Lincoln High School, and I was fortunate to just fell into this. We had so many physical education majors at Occidental that we had to add. We had John Marshall, Eagle Rock, and Franklin High Schools. We had to add a 4th-school, Abraham Lincoln, and my dad had coached there. So when it came around, the instructor said, "Where would you like to go?" I said, "I'd like to go to Lincoln." And I went to Lincoln. So it says following my dad's footsteps, not intentionally, but it just worked out that way. And I was coaching the first year. I was doing my student teaching there, and the director, the physical education director, said, "Our basketball coach is retiring this year. Would you like to coach basketball?" I thought, since I was 12, that's what I wanted to do. High school basketball coach in Los Angeles City School. I thought that was terrific. I just fell into that and loved it. And the first year I was coaching, we didn't get paid. There was a moratorium on coaches getting paid, so I did it for free. And next year we got paid, and it wasn't a lot of money, but I'd have done it for free the rest of my life. But I only coached for 4 years and then went into school administration, but I really enjoyed the opportunity to coach at Lincoln High School.
Now, do you think that it helped you being an official since you were a coach, so you saw kind of both sides?
Absolutely. I was coaching and officiating at the same time. I'd coach in the afternoon. Our high schools always played in games, so I played in the afternoon. But that night then I'd go officiate someplace. So I was on the bench one time and on the court the other time. So on the bench I knew I think I only got, in 4 years, I only got one technical foul.
That's pretty good.
And when our kids slowed down to block for another kid making a lay, and I said, "Oh no!" I called a foul. I said, "Oh no, Stan!" I knew the guy, Stan Gould was officiating, and he called technical foul on me. I said, "For that?" I said, "Okay." It's a little different now, isn't it, Mike? We see the coaches on officials all the time. But then I got a very lucky break in officiating. I think I got to give my dad a lot of credit for not only having gone to games and watched him. He never said to me, "No, do this, don't do this." Never gave me a rule book or a lifetime guide on how you officiate. But just watching him, I learned an awful lot. And so when I started officiating, I got a lot of lucky breaks, and I moved along in officiating very well. In fact, I was doing a high school basketball game. I guess about 1954, 55. I'd been officiating 4 or 5 years. And after the game, I got a knock on the door. And, the official now were just dead tired from working 2 all-black schools in the city of Los Angeles. We ran. Score was 83-84. and a knock on the door, and I said, "Who is it?" And he said, "John Wooden." I said, "Yeah, go away." Finally, we opened the door. It was Johnny Wooden, and he came in. And he said, "I just want to tell you guys, it's two-man basketball, man. Just want to you did a great job today." And he said, "By the way, Jim," he said, "would you like to work in the college ranks?" I said, "Yes, sir, I would." He said, "Well, I'd like to recommend you for our Pacific Coast Conference, as we call them, the Pac-12 then." And so it was Coach Wooden who put the recommendation in for you to work college. I worked 11 years and opened Pauley Pavilion when Lou Alcindor first started there. I got a lot of lucky breaks. I was very, very fortunate. I count my blessings every day.
So did you like officiating basketball better than football, or football better than basketball?
It was a great challenge to do both of them. I was doing also football in the Pacific Coast Conference at that time, and football is more taxing mentally. Basketball, I loved it because you were running. I love running. I ran, and UCLA had fast break and full court press and all that sort of stuff. And I love working the games because I really love the exercise. I love being really out there part of the action. Just two-man officials in those days with all through the Lou Alcindor years at UCLA and the great teams up and down the coast of California. So I got to go to Stanford and Cal and Oregon and Washington, work all those schools, and I really enjoyed going into. Officials don't have no official has a home court. You're always the enemy when you walk on the court, no matter where you go. It's not your home court. So I enjoyed that atmosphere. It's like going into the Colosseum in Rome, and you're fighting the lions all the time.
Yeah, and you can't win no matter what.
No, you can't. In fact, speaking of can't win, SC and UCLA were two schools in my hometown, and where of course Wood was at UCLA, and USC had several people. One of whom was Bob Boyd, a lifelong friend of mine. But I worked UCLA basketball. UCLA and USC played 7 times in 1 year because of a tournament and a playoff and this. I worked all 7 games. I thought, I can't win this one. Both sides of town hate me. So
well, see, people forget there was a lot of years there where USC was one of the top 10 or 15 teams in the country, but they only took the PCC champion.
That's right. Every time they were up there, but they always run second to UCLA, and it was a great rivalry, and I enjoyed it. It was got a chance to open Pauley Pavilion, got a chance to open the sports arena the first game in either one of those two places. So it came along at the right time. I think those years for me, working basketball and football in the 50s, and then of course going in the NFL in the 60s, was the best time for me. It was terrific.
Yeah, and that's the next question. You came into the NFL in 1960. The AFL was coming along at the same point. How did you end up being an official in the NFL? Was it something where they asked you, or?
I never applied, Mike. I was working in colleges, and we had really some good referees in the college ranks at the time. We had 5 in the Pacific Coast Conference, and I was like number 6, and I was only working a couple of games, a couple of varsity games a year. I worked 2 games, one with UCLA and one with USC. Both were nationally televised games. And evidently in 1959, the NFL and the AFL saw me. My first call was in February of 1960 from a guy named Bob Austin. He was a referee in the NFL. He left the NFL to become the supervisor officials for the AFL. They were just starting. They had no officials, as you would know. Well, they just saw the teams going in the AFL, the Houston Oilers, the Kansas City, the Raiders, and people like that. And so he called me and wanted me to say, he said, I'm going to be in Los Angeles next week. I'd like to interview you for the job. I said, Mr. Austin, I'd be glad to. 2 days later, the NFL called. Mike Wilson said, I know Bob Austin called you. Don't sign anything with the AFL. I want to interview you for the NFL. Well, how lucky can you be that never even applied, and both organizations after you. So I decided on the NFL because I had seen in the early days of the All-America Conference, in the late 40s, the early 50s, where the All-America Conference had folded because of lack of money they couldn't compete with the NFL. And I thought this AFL is not going to last very long. Well, it did, but it caused a merger in 1967. But I didn't want to go to the AFL and lose out, so I went to the NFL for $1,800 a year. That was my salary first year.
What was the AFL offering, if you don't mind me asking?
AFL was offering $2,000, and they were going to make me a referee. And I wanted to be a referee, but I thought, this is a whole new thing. Going in as a field judge and a crew of 5 now, I would get to work with some of the best referees ever. Bill Downs, Ron Gibbs, Red Pace, George Rennick, Bud Brubaker, Norm Schachter. These were great NFL referees. And I got to work with all of them in the first year because we didn't have crews. So as a field judge, I would travel. I was assigned at 30, first game when I was 31 years of age. And one of my first games I worked was the Chicago Bears in Los Angeles against the Rams, and met George Halas. It was like meeting Tom Edison. I mean, this guy invented the game. And here I am talking to a guy I heard so much about, George Halas, and it was a great honor to work for him. Not that he was nice to me, but a great honor anyway.
Now, did you notice, since he'd been there so long, he's coaching a team, was it something where these coaches would take you when you were a young guy and maybe try to see if they could intimidate you to get one over on you, to get you on their side?
Boy, you're right on target. When I met Mr. Halas, now as a field judge, my job was to get the captain of the visiting team. That's the Chicago Bears. So I went to Mr. Halas and said, Mr. Halas, I'm Jim Tunney. I'm the field judge. I need your captain. He said, Tunney, let's see. You went to Occidental College. You were athlete of the year. You played football, basketball. But he knew me. He knew me better than I knew him. He had done his homework. And and then he put his arm around me and said, now, Jimmy, now it becomes Jimmy now. He's done, Jimmy. He said, I've been in this game a long time. He said, well, I can do anything to help you. Let me know. Well, he was obviously trying to butter me up so that I would call the fouls in his favor, and I didn't. I called a runner down when he shouldn't have been down, and I had him next week. The next week he took the train to San Francisco. The Bears did, and I met him up there at Kezar Stadium, and he came up to me and he said, "Oh, you had a tough call there, Jimmy." He said, "That's okay. You shake it off. We let the fella get up and run now. If he gets knocked down, unless he gets knocked down by an opponent, if he goes down on his own, he can get a run. You know that." I said, "Yes, sir. I made a mistake there." He said, "That's okay. You shake it off. You'll be okay." And so he was very kind to me in that way, that person. I worked a lot of games. I worked the 100th game between the Green Bay Packers, the Chicago Bears, and Wrigley Field. And it was a great honor to work that game, and I don't know, probably up to 200 something now, but to work in Wrigley Field with Papa Halas, as they called him, and he's just was terrific. It was tough on the officials, but the thing I liked about George Halas is that he was tough on the field. He might call you, cuss you out, and try to intimidate you. He never called the league office Monday morning to complain about you. When it was over, it was over. And I wish coaches could do that today.
Well, now, who was the worst coach at doing that, calling?
I think I worked, Mike, probably for 300 coaches in my lifetime in the NFL, and I very, very few people. I don't think Coach Lombardi or Coach Landry or other people would call the league office, but they might have somebody on their staff call them. It was a thing you did at that time. And one time, all we had was real film, and it was cumbersome to do all that. Now with replay, why it's so instantaneous? Why they're calling the league office all the time, and they did in the 60s and 70s too, but not so much. They didn't. They would complain and swear at you and all that during the game, but when it was over, it was over.
Yeah. And the great thing about when you came in 1960 with the AFL, as we talked about, is kind of when the NFL was starting to take off and blossom. And you had guys like, I think Landry and Lombardi were head coaches for the first time those years. You still had guys like George Halas, Paul Brown in there. What was it like for you those first few years? It had to be something that was, amazing to be a part of.
Very, very, very frightful, very intimidating to travel in, as I was 30 and 31, 32 years of age, travel into New York or to Washington, D.C. We played Griffith Stadium in Washington, D.C. This was before any of the RFK stadiums and the other stadiums now are built, old stadiums like that. In fact, one of the first games that I worked my first year was in Washington, D.C. Against the New York Giants who come in. And Giants had Frank Gifford and White, terrific players and people you'd seen on television and everything before that. But it was in Griffith Stadium. The snow came that night, and we had to get the snow off the field before we could play. Held the game up 25 minutes before we could actually play, and our game lasted 1 hour and 58 minutes because nobody wanted to play in that heavy snow. All we had was 4 markers in the 4 pylons in the corners. No lines, no anything. We just made up, and when all the players said, "Let's get this game over with." So it went as fast as we could. But I met a guy named Bill Downs, and he was one of the best referees I ever had a chance to learn a lot from in terms of rules and things like that. But going in places like that, in fact, I mentioned to you that I wanted to be a coach when I was 12. I knew that. But one of my other ambitions, because I listened on the radio when I was a kid to the New York Yankees, I wanted to pitch for the New York Yankees. I thought I could pitch for the New York Yankees. I couldn't break a pane of glass from across a small room, but I thought I could do that. So when I got a New York Giants game my first year in 1960, I walked in again. We took the train from downtown Manhattan. We took the subway up to New York. We got off in the Bronx up there and walked around from the back of the stadium to the front of the stadium, went in and locked in that door. And in the locker room, I went in and set my bag down in the locker room, walked right down the ramp, walked right up the first base dugout, walked right out to the mound, and pretended I'm pitching now for the New York Yankees. It was a fantasy that I had, and I said, I'm going to be on that mound. Now, there was no mound there because football field was...
I was going to ask. I was wondering why there was a mound there.
It was flat, but it was a mound in my mind. I stood on that mound, and I was all by myself. Before the game, we were an hour and a half, 2 hours before the game, and the officials, nobody else came with me. I went out there by myself. But it was something I'd seen in my mind and heard on the radio for all those years of the Yankee Stadium. And what a great place as 31 years of age to be in Yankee Stadium and all of the surroundings of Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, and just incredible feeling that I had for that. It's a magic place anyway. Sorry that they had to tear the old one down, but it was just something else.
All right, another one. We want to talk a little bit about some of the memorable games you were a part of. One that I think would stand out to you just from looking on it on the outside and in looking about your younger life would be Super Bowl 11. You worked in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl, and it's like 30 years later after your dad had refereed the Rose Bowl. That had to be kind of surreal also.
Yeah, you've done your homework very well because in 1939 when I met Jackie Robinson and in the Rose Bowl, then I played at Occidental, as I said, and we played in the Rose Bowl because we played Caltech. That was their home field. Caltech was a home field. It was the Rose Bowl. I played in the Rose Bowl. I refereed high school championship games in the Rose Bowl. I worked the Junior Rose Bowl game 3 times. And then in 1947, my dad refereed the Rose Bowl game between UCLA and Illinois. Illinois had a guy named Buddy Young. I went to that game. I sat in row 21, tunnel 21, I should say. It's in the southwest corner of the Rose Bowl. Watching my dad referee that Rose Bowl game. January 1st of 1947, January 9th of 1977, 30 years later to the month that my dad refereed, I got the chance to work the first Super Bowl game ever we played in the Rose Bowl. Great honor for me. I was thrilled when I got the assignment. Of all the games that I worked, that probably because of my dad working and me sitting on the bench alongside Jackie Robinson and refereeing all those other games there, to work that game, the first one in the Rose Bowl, I was really thrilled. It was a great honor for me.
Yeah, it had to be. And a lot of people forget that 47 Rose Bowl with Buddy Young was a game where I think Illinois was a fairly large underdog going into it. UCLA was undefeated, and I think Illinois beat them by like 30 points.
Yeah, Illinois did beat them. I think it was 47-14. I'm not sure of that number, but Buddy scored 3 touchdowns that day. Ernie Case was a quarterback for UCLA, and I can remember all those things. They just stick out for me. But it was very much so. Illinois was not favored. It was the days that the Pacific Coast Conference played the Big Ten champions, E2 champions. They did that for many, many years, as you know. I always loved that rivalry, the Big Ten and the Pacific Coast Conference. And this is one of the best games one of the classic games I got a chance to be part of. My dad had been a head linesman in a game in 1945 when I think Michigan and USC played. I did not go to that game. But the 47 game was just a great game for me. And then how it came out 30 years later to the month that I got a chance to work in the same place that my dad had worked. You can't make that stuff up, you know.
Yeah, and a couple more games you had something to do with. The Ice Bowl, I think you were an alternate, weren't you?
I was. It was my first year as a referee. I was a field judge, as I mentioned, from 1960, and then in 1967, now as you know, I was still working basketball in the Pacific Coast Conference, and that week I didn't expect, as a first-year referee, to receive an assignment. I thought I just wouldn't get the assignment for anything, alternate or whatever, and I was assigned to work in Portland for what they call the Far West Classic basketball. I think there were 4 or 6 basketball teams play in Portland. And I had the game Friday night and Saturday night. And on Tuesday, I got a call from the league office and said, you're going to be the alternate in Green Bay. We want you in Green Bay Saturday afternoon. So I called the supervisor officials and I said, I can't work Friday and Saturday. Maybe I can work Thursday and Friday. No, he said, no, you just go ahead and work and we'll forget about the basketball thing. And so I did that, and we flew with Norm Schachter and Bill Schleibaum, who was the head linesman. We flew into Green Bay on Saturday afternoon. And very nice. We had dinner Saturday night, walked around town. The moon was out. Everything was fine. Went to church on Sunday morning. We woke up Sunday morning to go to church. The snow had come in. The cold had come in. We had nothing. I mean, I'm a California kid. My blood is pretty thin. I don't go with that Midwest and Eastern stuff, all that snow they had. So we went, the whole crew, the 6 of us and the 2 alternates, went downtown. Pat Harder was the alternate. He was an umpire. And went downtown to Green Bay and Army-Navy store. The owner was in the store doing inventory. Now it was December 31st. Had it been December 30th or 29th, he wouldn't have been there doing inventory.
Yeah.
It was the end of the year. He was doing inventory, so he knocked on the door, and he said, "We're closed." I said, "No." He said, "We know you're closed. We need clothes. Let us in." So he finally let us in. We told him what we were doing, and we bought. This was before Gore-Tex, so I had mittens, and I had 3 pair of mittens on. We got all plastic bags. We would take garbage bags, the black thing, cut a hole in the bottom of it, pull it over our heads, and pull the bag down around our waist, and then take tape and wrap it around our waist to keep the heat in. The same thing with our feet. We'd put plastic bags on our feet and socks. I mean, pantyhose and long johns, they were just cloth. That's not going to work in that stuff. But I think I had 2 pair of long johns on and 3 gloves. And I was on the sidelines there. I didn't get to run around like Norm Schachter and Schleibaum.
Yeah, I was going to say, you had the roughest job out of everybody.
I did. Well, the only good part about it was that as they took the timeouts, I was near the bench, so I would stand there with Don Chandler and his feet and Bart Starr in his hand next to the heater, the blower that was on the sidelines. I stood along the side there as much as I could. My job was to keep track of the down and the distance. The league didn't want anybody to lose a down or get the wrong spot or marking a ball, and so I was responsible to double check all that. It was trying to race stuff down in that cold weather and freezing and the wind blowing and all that. and it was a great challenge. But I was honored to be. I now my only real credit now is that I'm the only living official from the ice ball game. So
Yeah, and another game that stood out to me was the Fog Bowl, Philadelphia, Chicago in 1988. What I remember about that is I'm a Cincinnati Bengals fan, and the Bengals were playing the
yeah,
Seahawks. That was December
yeah,
31st also. And me and
right.
my dad watched like the first quarter of the Philly-Chicago game before we leave for the late game, which was the Bengals-Seahawks. And we get to the stadium, and on the Jumbotron, the game's supposed to be on, but you can't see anything. So I get a final score of the game, and this is the thing. Until that night, when I got home, and I'd set my VCR to tape the rest of the Philly-Chicago game, until I got home, I didn't realize the reason I couldn't see the game was because of the fog. And,
Yeah.
I mean, that's one time where if a coach tells you you're blind, he's pretty much right, isn't it?
Well, it's a great story. Though it was again December 31st, and Terry Bradshaw and Vern Lundquist were doing the game, broadcasting it for CBS. And first half was fine. The stadium was good. The game went along fine. We came out to begin the second half, and the fog over from Lake Michigan rolled over those eastern bleachers at Soldier Field, and the fog had started to come in there. And so it got bad right almost immediately. And so I went to Buddy Ryan of the Eagles, and I said, Coach, what do you think? You want to play? Yeah. He said, let's play. He said, the fog's on both on the same side of the ball. The fog's all over the place. And I went to Mike Dixon. Mike, the same thing. Yeah, let's play. Of course, Buddy and Mike had known each other for quite a while, as you know, because Buddy Ryan was an assistant with Ditka for a while, and there was a pretty good tough feeling between them. So we began the game, and in the third quarter, it got to the point where they tell me Bradshaw couldn't see the game from up there. It's kind of like your fog lights as you're driving through fog, and when you throw the lights up, you can't see anything. You take the lights down, and you can see more. Where Bradshaw couldn't see up there because the stadium lights are blinding the whole thing. So he came down the sidelines. But then in the beginning, there wasn't, the announcer couldn't see it either, the PA announcer. So I became the PA announcer, and I would, each down, I would say, third down, 21-yard line, third and 8, or 21, whatever it would be, announce that, and I announced each down and distance for the part of the third quarter, all the fourth quarter. And it was just that, Randall Cunningham, the quarterback of the Eagles, had set a new passing record that day, 404 yards. Now, how do you do that in the fog? Well, he did it in the fog. In fact, even the Bears on a kickoff, the Bears or the Eagles, I'm not sure which one of them tried out the thing we do in high school in the playground where you do a reverse and fake the handoff fake the toss to the other guy, and it didn't work. They caught him and tackled the guy anyway. So the fog didn't bother a lot of people, but it was you could see a lot of times the fog kind of come in a little bit and then drift out. And after the game, Joe Brown, who was vice president of communications for the league, called me from the press box and said, "Don't change your uniform. CBS wants to do an interview." Well, that was the first live interview from a referee after the game in the history of the NFL. They didn't want the officials talking to the press, but Joe came down, and Will McDonough, who's passed away now, his son is Sean. Will did an interview with me and asked me about the fog and the conditions and what we did. I kept checking all the time. I should digress and say that during the game, I was checking with Don Weiss, who was the commissioner's representative, and each time it was a timeout, I go to the sidelines and pick up the phone and talk to Don. And all he ever said, he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "The coaches want to play, so we'll keep playing." We did that, and that's what Will McDonough wanted to know, is how I communicated with the NFL. And then after that, Joe Brown said, "Don't go. Jim Gray of NBC wants to interview you." NBC was doing that game right afterwards, the game you talked about.
Yeah.
And so he said, I've known Jim Gray a long time, and he has all the same questions. And finally said, "Jim," he said, "I was standing on the sidelines. I couldn't see the goalpost from one end to the other. How could you do that?" And I said, "That's because you're a reporter, and I'm a referee. I could see it. Jim to this day recounts that story. I got flustered and said, "Oh, back to you in the studio, Bob Costas." All those things have a real kind of interesting twist to them. But we just thought that, you couldn't stop the game. It was a Saturday night. The next day, other games were being played. And then on Monday would be January 2nd, because the colleges don't play on January 1st, play on January 2nd. All the bowl games would be on, the 5 bowl games in those days. So you couldn't play until you hold them over until Tuesday. We thought, do we stop the game? Do we wait an hour? Do we wait 2 hours? Do we wait till Tuesday? If you win, whoever wins on Tuesday, you got to play the next weekend, and that's that didn't happen in those days. So it was we decided, it's football. We play football in rain, snow, sleet, cold weather, fog roll. We play it. That's it.
Yeah. My next question would be instant replay. I know you were there when it first came in. I think it was, 1986, if I remember
86.
Right? What's your take on instant replay? Did you think it was a good idea when it originally was proposed?
In 1978, Mike, I worked a game between Buffalo Bills and Dallas Cowboys preseason in Dallas in the old Texas Stadium. And when I got to get the shuttle bus to the hotel, I saw Norm Schachter and Art McNally, who was then the supervisor, standing on the curb. And I said, what are you guys doing here? And so we just came to watch the game. What they were doing is Tex Schramm, who's a big advocate for instant replay for a long time, was in the booth. Schramm and McNally and Schachter were all in the booth that day watching the game. Never stopped the game, but they watched it on television and see if they could run the replays and see if the replay system worked. Could we stop the game here? Could we look at this replay? How do we do this? What do we do? That was 1978. It took the league owners 8 more years before they got to 1986 that they finally put instant replay in. And they didn't want to stop. The purists say, hey, let's just play the game. Don't be, mistakes can be made by players, by coaches, by officials. It's going to happen. Let's just play the game. Well, after a while, they came out with 1986. They wanted to do that. And I got a chance to work the first Monday night football game with instant replay. It was the Chicago Bears versus the New York Giants, the 2 back-to-back Super Bowl champions.
Yeah.
In Soldier Field, Chicago. So I thought when it came in, that would be a good thing. That if we can get the play right, that's what officials want. We want to get every play right. Now, we're not going to get every play right. Just the same thing as a quarterback is not going to throw a completed pass every time, or a guard is going to make a good block every time. There are going to be mistakes that are going to be made. But if we could correct those mistakes, particularly the really important ones, to make a difference. Unfortunately, it's got to the point now where everything is on replay, and it's going to the point now where the fans want it. The fans love it. You'll never get rid of replay, Mike. They'll keep it. They might tweak it a bit, but
I think it needs to be there. The thing that worries me is I also like the CFL, the Canadian Football League. And the Canadian Football League now has got into where you can even challenge a pass interference. And I don't think a judgment call like that should be called in because, number one, it slows the game down so much.
We feel the same way. A judgment call is a difficult thing. We allow so much, just take pass interference, we allow so much what we call tactile contact between a defensive player and the receiver that both are using their hands to push off or move around. And as long as you don't gain an advantage or put the other player at a disadvantage, we allow it. But then they go up in the air and they go for the ball. And did you go for the ball? Did you go for the man? It's a tough judgment call. The downfield officials now, side judge, back judge, field judge, have a tough time really deciding, and they're running at the same fast speed the others are. They're in motion as well. They're not sitting still in their living room like you and I are. And it's a tough thing to call. The other tough one is the pass or fumble by the quarterback, and you can go back and replay a lot of those things. And if it's a blatant mistake and it needs to be corrected, okay. But let's not get into the fine stuff and let's let them play football, for example.
All right, so what's your take on the NFL today compared to 1960, 1990? Do you think the game has gotten better or not?
The players are do more things now than they did in those days. Boyd Dowler was a great receiver for the Green Bay Packers, and he played in weather that was very freezing most of the time without gloves, or if he had gloves, he had mittens on. Yeah. All the players now, including the linemen, they all have gloves, and on those gloves, those little tactile things that kind of like the stickum that we used to have in the 70s with the Raiders and the host
Jack
people.
Tatum. Not Jack Tatum, Lester Hayes.
Yeah, well, Lester Hayes, Jack Tatum had as well. Blitnikoff had them, sure, and they would put the stickum on the inside of their thigh, and so before the play, they'd just tap their thigh and people would stick them on their hands, just a little, and then the ball gets sticky and all that sort of thing. Well, we've gotten rid of that now, but they're all wearing gloves now. The style of play has changed so much. There's far more passing now than the running game was. So Lombardi would have that great sweep with Kramer and Thurston and those guys. But now we hardly have running backs anymore.
And it's hard to run a sweep against second level of linebackers that are all running 4.4, 4.5 40s, and safeties and corners that are running 4.3, 4.4.
And they're all 6'2", 6'3", 6'4",
yeah,
and 250 to 60 pounds. That was always my question about where would you play Dick Butkus today? Now, Dick Butkus was an outstanding linebacker for the Bears, no question about it. But he couldn't play today. He couldn't play linebacker. He's not fast enough. He couldn't play defensive end. He's not big enough, not strong enough. I mean, not as his age now, but when he was in his prime. He would have a tough position for him today. Now, Dick says he could play today, but that's
well, and plus, if you have Dick born 30 years later with the nutritional differences, the training differences, he's probably going to be a little bigger also. Yeah. But I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, the question that you ask about, to me, working in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s were the best time for the NFL for me. I had a great time with it, and I worked all 3 decades and just a great time with it. The game has gone on to the point now where it's a lot about money. I remember Jerry Kramer telling me that he almost quit the Packers after the second or third year. He wanted to get $7,000 a year, and Lombardi was willing to pay him $6,500.
Yeah, we actually had Jerry on the show like 2 or 3 years ago, and he told the exact same story.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's the deal. I'm just, by the way, just so pleased that I've known Jerry off the field. We've done a lot of things at the NFL charities and things like that. So pleased he got into the Hall of Fame for this coming August, so he'll be inducted.
Yeah, him and Robert Brazil both, because I think Robert Brazil was one of the most underrated players of all time.
No question, but people don't even remember the name Brazil sometimes. But Kramer is one of many Packers that are in there, and the Packers they had great players, and they would, if they're in their conditioning and what they do today would be competent players today. But the game has changed to the point where it's more about a business and more about the money and more about the trades and more about a lot of the stuff that I think is far away from football. And then we have the off-field incidences. Paul Harding is known pretty well from Green Bay as having a couple of drinks from time to time.
Yeah.
And they tell the stories. The cop would see Harding driving away from a bar or something on his way home and stop and say, "Paul, God darn it, stop it. Get in a car and put him in the police car and take him home." Not today. Today he's going to be arrested.
Oh, yeah. Today it's going to be on TMZ, and there's going to be 30 different videos of it on YouTube.
Yep. And some guy walking down the street see it, put it on his iPhone, and send it to everybody he knows. So, yeah, it's a different game today. It's far more viral, far more public than it used to. But the thing that concerns me too is the off-field incidents, not only the drinking, but domestic abuse. I lived in, as I told you in the beginning, with a house with my mother and my dad. Never saw my dad with any kind of. He was a very strong human being. He battled me. Never abused my mother. Never even verbally. Now they might have argued. I never heard of it. They might have argued, but it was never any kind of a battle that today you get people fighting back, and you get players who have birthed several children from several different ladies and not even married. It's a whole different environment, and a lot of people who have committed felons that are still playing in the NFL. And I always thought that I don't think they'll ever get to it, but I would think that if you commit a felon and are not just accused, but you are convicted as a felon, you are done in the NFL. You cannot play anymore.
Yeah.
But there's so much pressure from the Players Association and from lawyers and back and forth and all that. That'll probably never happen.
Well, and let's face it, the owners are afraid that maybe one of their best players will do it then, and they're going to lose them.
Exactly. And look at Ezekiel Elliott last year that got all that took him all year long to figure it out, and then suspend him till the last part of the season, and then the owner of the Cowboys is challenging the commissioner with that. Well, that didn't happen in the past. It was more of a family environment, and we're all in this thing together. So it's a different game today, but it's entertainment. That's what people want. And then it goes to the celebrations. I'm not a big fan of celebrations, and now they have the award at the NFL Honors for the best after touchdown celebration. Come on.
Yeah. 2 years ago, that was illegal.
Illegal, absolutely. And
see, I don't really care if somebody gets in the end zone all of a sudden, you're excited, you spike the ball, you do a little dance, that's one thing. But when you got 9 guys coming out, they practiced it all week, probably more than they practiced for the game plan, I think it's gone a little too far.
That's a great point. The more they practice it for their game plan, they drop a pass, if they should be practicing catching passes or blocking or tackling something, but they're practicing now.
Yeah, but anymore you can't really practice that. I mean, see, I think I agree that players today are bigger, faster, and stronger, but when I look at players in the 70s, 80s, and even 90s, I think technically they were better football players. I think they were better coached. I think they were better taught. And, I mean, if you look at offensive linemen today, there's a few guys that are really good offensive line coaches, and you see a few teams with good offensive lines. But you don't have the guys like Howard Mudd, Jim McNally, all these guys that coached the offensive lines back in the day. Technically, they're not as good. And then with quarterbacks, heck, you're coming with 3/4 of the quarterbacks that people are going to draft have never even been under center before.
Sure. It's played differently. It's thought differently. It's coached differently. And the rules not only the rules on the field, but the policies of when they can practice and how much hitting they can do.
Yeah.
And there's no question about the concern on concussions and CTEs. No question about that there's some danger. But there's danger in that in soccer. There's danger in that in hockey. There's danger in that in boxing. We don't hear nearly as much about the concern for those sports that we do here about football.
Yeah, and I do a Legends of Boxing show, and I can tell you I know a lot more boxers that got problems with this than any other sport.
Yes, yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, every time that head takes a punch, that brain's going to move inside that skull, and it's going to cause some neurons to malfunction, and it's going to happen. And but I still believe in the game. So it's an exciting game. I think it's the only game where you really learn teamwork. You don't learn in school. You don't learn teamwork in English or math class, but you can learn getting along with other people and work with other people in sports. It happens in drama and drill team and band and stuff like that too, where you got to work together for the good of the team and maybe sacrificing some of your own interests for the good of the team. And that's the secret of society, getting along with other people.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's what society now is lacking big time.
I'm writing an article. I write a weekly blog called On the Tunney Side of Sports. I'm now in my 13th year doing it every week. I write it for the newspaper. It comes out on the internet called On the Sunny Side of Sports. And next week's article's on parenting, that we are really bad in parenting. We've lost a whole, that's where society ought to be concentrating on, is parenting starts in the home. And a lot of parents, as people say, if you don't, a friend of mine, Stan Morrison, quoted, if you don't have a father in the home, you'll find one in the streets.
Yeah.
And that's what happens, and that's too bad about so many people that don't have good parenting. And there are many, many fathers absent in the homes, either abandoning the home or never being there in the first place.
Yeah, and I can tell you this, my boys, my younger son doesn't really have a whole lot of friends. He just kind of hangs out with me all the time, which I like. But my older son probably has 10, 15 friends. I don't think he has any friends that have a mom and a dad that live together in a home with their kid.
Mm-hmm. And it's a shame. That's too bad, because that's what it's all about. But and that's what needs to happen. Particularly the father image for a young man as a young boy is vital. And as we say, if you don't find it in the home, you find it in the streets. But and a lot of those are kids from really impoverished area, no question about that. And they find whatever they can to survive, and maybe athletics, maybe NFL football is the only avenue for success for them. And otherwise, they'd be in jail or they'd be out of a job.
Yeah, and I think we agree on society. So
yeah.
I mean, it's a shame. But as you said, you talked about a Tunney side of sports. You want to tell people about some of the books you've written? I know you do a lot of public speaking.
Yes, we do that, and have done that for a number of years. I've written 12 books. The first book I wrote was called Impartial Judgment. I wanted to call the book because I don't care who wins. Because as a referee, I don't care who wins. I get that question every week or every Super Bowl. Well, who's going to win the Super Bowl? And I'll say the team that has the most points always wins the Super Bowl. That's the only answer I can give you. I don't care who wins. I've never been a fan of a team or a player. I'm associated with players from Frank Gifford and Bart Starr and Johnny Unitas all the way up to Joe Montana and Steve Young and Jim Kelly and Dan Marino and all the coaches that I've dealt with. I've never been a fan of friends, yes, a lot of them now, but I've never been a fan that way. And so I wrote a book called Impartial Judgment and talked about my experiences in my 31 years in the NFL. And then I wrote a book called Chicken Soup for the Sports Fan Soul. That's a Chicken Soup series that came out. I wrote one on the sports fan soul. It had 101 stories of sports there. Funny stuff as well as really important, poignant stuff. And then I wrote a book called On the Tunney Side of Sports that is taken from the articles that I write every week. And another one called It's the Will, Not the Skill. It's about the lifestyle of her, about almost a biography of Herm Edwards. Herm Edwards is now the coach at Arizona State University. But when he got the job as a head coach of the New York Jets in 2001, and I've known Herm since 1982, we're good friends, live here on the same Central Coast together. I said, Herm, I got to tell you a story, because as a kid, Herm grew up on Fort Ord because his dad was in the military, and he shined shoes for the soldiers at 35 cents a pair of shoes and mowed lawns with a borrowed lawnmower for $1 a lawn, and grew up to become the head coach of the New York Jets and then the Kansas City Chiefs and now the Arizona State University Sun Devils. It's a great story about, and he says the team that gets the Super Bowl is because of the will, not the skill. All 32 teams with 53 players have the skill, but the one that gets there is the will. And it's a great story about, not about so much about her, but about it's the will, not the skill. So those kind of books have been fun for me to write, and speaking is always been. I'm in 40 years now as a professional speaker and speaking for Fortune 500 companies as well as associations and all over the place. It's fun to present stories that I've learned from my school business as an educator, high school principal, school superintendent, as well as an NFL referee, and tie those two together. In terms of leadership, I've been in the field with some great leaders over the years, all the way from Hallis and Lombardi up to present-day coaches that I admire, and talk about their leadership skills. So those are things I've been writing about. Those are things I speak about when talking to audiences, groups, yeah.
And I imagine most of those books can probably be found on Amazon, can't they?
They can. Most of them are all on Amazon and on my website, jimtunney.com. They're all on there. And if people want to have a weekly motivational article, and then this next one coming out is on parenting, by the way. It's Tunney Side of Sports, Tunney, TunneySideOfSports.com, and they can get that for free. It's at no charge. It's in the newspaper here locally, as well as on the blog. So,
all right.
Yeah.
I would recommend that highly. I looked at some of them here over the last few days, was very impressed. I really want to thank you for coming on the show. I mean, it was an absolute honor to talk to somebody with your knowledge and your experience in the game of football and life.
Mike, it was a pleasure for me to be with you. You've got a great show and a great website and a great thing that you're doing, and I'm honored to be part of your show.
All right. We'd love to have you back sometime.
Anytime. Thank you so much for the call.
Thank you, sir. All right, guys. I want to remind you to go to gruelingtruth.net, check out all of our shows. You can check out our Boxing Legends show, which we've had George Foreman, Larry Holmes on recently. Also, catch all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Jim Tunney, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.